So, I had prepared a rather dull, straightforward workshop about the toolkit. Instead, I threw that idea out of the window, um, and I was thinking, as we have so many great people in the audience, that instead of talking about the toolkit, we're going to actually do the toolkit, right? We're going to spend an hour together. I have absolutely no idea where this hour will lead us, but I'll guide you through it to experience what a toolkit may do for you. Now, just one line, formal line about a toolkit. So if you go to the website, I think now the music, can you please now turn the music off? Or not, it's okay, we do then. If you go to the website of the project, which is ichmuseums.eu, and you press on the big label that says toolkit, you'll end up on a section of the website that is the toolkit. And what a toolkit does is it helps you answer the how question. So, you've committed, you've decided that you really want to work with an ICH community, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And you're a community, but you want to talk with museums, correct?
No,
Yeah, more or less. And you just want to know everything, how to get started and how to become an expert in this field, right?
Yes, because I want to put my language on a museum.
So we all have these very specific questions. Now the tool, and I may have forced them upon you. The toolkit answers this how question. How can museums and communities, groups, and individuals working with intangible cultural heritage come together to safeguard ICH and all the little steps that go through that. Now, because we're with so many fantastic people here, many people from the project who've been working on the project for a long time, but also many of you in the audience with tons of experience. Instead of showing you, and now we have tool Y. Tool Y teaches you how to involve communities. I was thinking, let's see, what do you want to learn in this hour that we have about working with intangible cultural heritage? And then we're just going to use the toolkit and each other to figure that out. So I've put this here. And let's just see. Oh, don't run away. Oh, now you're really in a shit. There we go. What would you like? What are questions you have about working with intangible cultural heritage or safeguarding intangible cultural heritage? Who has a question? Ooh, yes, there's a question. Who owns it? So ownership. Questions about ownership. What other questions do we have that we want to have answered right in this hour? So we have 59 minutes left to change the world, to answer the questions that you may have. And if we can't answer them with the toolkit, we'll just point to somebody from the IMP project or somebody else and we'll fix them for you. This is sort of like an hour of super together consultancy on ICH, safeguarding ICH. Ownership, yes. How do we make museums attractive too? Just scream. If you have a question, just scream. And by that, if I have 2 or 3 words left, my short-term memory is average. If you want to write for me, yeah, sure. If is your handwriting, you're sure better than mine. The words missing there is attractive too. So how do you cope with different? So conflicting ideas, conflicting. So how do you find the right person in a museum to talk about ICH? Why? Why in the first place? Well, here you go. There's a beautiful book out today. I really highly recommend it. Oh, sorry about it. how to safeguard something that is dynamic. So how to, yeah, right. What other questions do you see? You mean if different people think differently about, some people say, but that's the authentic way to do this, the authentic tradition is different from the one that we're practicing right now, out of the range of dynamic options, what to collect. I'm using the microphone. Oh, for the audience. I'll repeat the questions people say in the microphone. Oh yeah, good. There's one here. Thank you. Sorry, live stream people. Yes, there's a question here.
As museums, we have material culture in our collection that we got, say, 100 years ago. But of course, we have not until recently started to collect the immaterial cultural heritage. So can there be sort of an archaeology of ICH that we can connect to the objects in our collection?
So you can clearly see I'm not going to answer that question, but we're going to try and answer it because I have absolutely no idea. Any more? Yeah, we have how much room do we have still? Second page. All right. How many seats are there? 20. All right. No, we'll do 3-4 more questions and then we'll get started.
How to help and support the museums to find the links with the work they are already doing, but take it up from there.
So looking at the things museums are already doing and bringing
Yes.
ICH into that. Absolutely. Yes.
Are there people here who are working with languages, to put languages bedrohte Sprache, ja? Minderheitensprachen in the museums?
So are the people here, right
Are
now,
there
working with
people
language?
here who are working with that to put Minderheitensprachen, so minority languages in museums as intangible?
Let's ask. Is there anyone here who works with languages as intangible cultural heritage? Or as so, yes? All right, check. One question answered. Well done. You as well? You also work with languages? Oh, no, you? No. Oh, you have a question. Great.
Just quickly, how do you make traditions interesting for the young people?
How do you make traditions interesting for young people? How young? Like kids or millennials?
So I have a question. How dance tradition can be incorporated in music? Like,
Who has worked with dance? I know there's some people here who've worked with dance. Yeah, nobody? Dance. How can we incorporate dance into the museum? Has any one of you worked on a project with dance? Yes, there's one there. Would you say you're able to help answer that question? Oh, sorry about that.
Maybe it's not that easy to do dance in a museum, but there are museums that are about dance, so you can look for them. But you can interact with normal exhibitions or things like that in a museum, and there are a lot of organizations working on that already. So it must be.
And do you know one or two or three for them that afterwards you can go over and have a chat? There's drinks,
Yes.
Kia, right? Still? Not now. Later there's drinks, I think, right?
Yes, but I don't. Oh.
There's another coffee break.
Okay, but I will try to get to it.
You'll try. Excellent. Okay, so how the toolkit works is these are questions of all different levels, right? Some of them are introductory questions, like why in the first place do we need to do this? Which may be a question you need to answer to convince a government or your boss or your colleagues or a community to start doing this. Then there's the question. I don't remember who asked it. Like, where do you get started? And your question: what are the right people to approach in a museum? Let's say these are introductory questions. You're getting started on the road to working with ICH. That's the first category of the toolkit. And we've created with the project specific tools to help you through this. So there's a booklet, which is like a summary of a summary of a summary of the beautiful thick book, which you can use to maybe convince your boss. And it also asks you to reflect on some questions in your own organization to get started on this topic. But there are different categories. There's also the category of tools, which helps in a much more specific way to address specific questions. For instance, what are the different communities we work with and how can we work with them? And I think personally most interesting is the third category of tools, because this is the one, and this is a little bit what I've been doing when I connected you and you. It's where we look not just at the tools that we created in this project, but all the tools and all the material that is out there in the world, made by others with experience in working on safeguarding of ICH, that we may be able to use ourselves. And there's a little, before we start answering the questions, so Lena, are you here? Yeah, they are. So you've given this to everyone, right?
Well, for quite many of them.
Quite many. So this is a tool that you developed in Finland, which we can use because you can download it for free, and we'll link to it from the toolkit as well. That is, well, maybe you can best explain it yourself in one sentence.
Thank you. The wheel chart of sustainability. So with this tool, you can discuss with your communities, NGOs, museums, how are you doing in sustainable development in all of the 4 pillars. It's with 24 questions. It's free, downloadable online. Just go and print it and cut it and have your own workshops all over the Europe and the world.
So this helps you link intangible cultural heritage to the topic of sustainability. Now, so what the toolkit also does is it links to these sort of materials from others around the world that you may be able to use. What we're going to do with your questions right now, do you have more?
Yes?
Yes.
No,
So
sorry, they're on the other side.
all right, so if you want one of these, go find Lena, or go to our website in about 2 days or so when we've had a chance to link to your tool from there. And if you have your own tool, make sure to send it to Kia or to Urijn or to me or to anyone, so that we can also link and integrate it into the work that we do. Well, all right. So I want to use the same approach on your questions, right? Is it a question that we can answer by connecting 2 or 3 people in the room? We'll do that. If it's a connection, if we know somewhere where it's been fixed, we'll do that. And if we don't know anyone out there who's answered this question before, we're just going to find a solution ourselves. You want to help? I don't know if I need help. Who else wants to help? Who else wants to have a supporting role in that? You want to have a supporting, who else? Can I get some more supporters? Yeah? All right. Good. Maybe you can say, like, now the question's been answered. You're the conscience of the meeting. You say, like, we have an hour. That's way too much time for that question.
Okay.
Okay? Who owns the tour? This is a question of ownership. Whose question was that again? So when is this question to you successfully answered?
When I would have an indication of where to start and where not to fall into the many pitfalls that I think this might bring me to.
So regarding the ownership of the intangible cultural heritage, whose word? Who feels comfortable answering this question? Kia feels comfortable answering the question.
Well, one element in the toolkit that we developed is a visual that gives a first insight into what intangible cultural heritage entails, and gives also an overview of the domains. And what was the question again? About ownership.
Yeah. What are some of the, when you talk about the ownership of a tradition, of a craft, of a how do we avoid stepping into typical pitfalls when we start working with that? Yes?
I think when we look at heritage is about something we inherit from our ancestors. So I can give example of 2 products. So a cat shaft, so a cheese slicer, and a stone mortar, which is both are in my kitchen right now. So I can say the stone mortar is my heritage because I can say my mother, my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother used it in the kitchen. But the cheese slicer is only I only use it because I live in the Netherlands for 6 years. And that's where I was exposed to this heritage product, but it's not mine. So I think that's how I can define whose heritage, if I can find the link of the ancestor connection.
Thank you. Anyone else have or do you feel like this is a topic that we need to do a 5-minute mini exercise around? I'll make it up on the spot.
Maybe, I don't know if this is my role, but what I can say is that there is a tool about not who owns, of course, the answer is not there, but it's a tool helping you to see who you should involve around an ICH practice.
That's, yeah, indeed. There is, I think it's in the second category, right? In the tools category, on the tools, there's it's a 1-page, I think maybe 2 pages PDF, which allows you to think structurally about who are the people who are related to this intangible cultural heritage and in which way should they be involved. So merely as recipients or as co-creators, participants, etc., using a ladder of participation combined with a sort of like community mapping exercise. So that may be a very good place to start. I'm going to switch microphones because this one's too loud and then we get an echo. I hope, yeah, this is better. So we don't get a very annoying. Anyone else has something to say about ownership?
I think this question brings us in the field of cultural appropriation too, and there the problem is often that a community which does not have so much power, but does have beautiful cultural traditions or uses, is sometimes robbed of these uses by communities with much more power, and they bring it on the floor just for profit. So that's one aspect of it.
I think there's a part in the book, I'm looking at you again, which says, at the end of the book, the beautiful book you all have, which says about one of the risks of working with intangible cultural artists is exactly this. So if you use the one tool, make sure not to fall into the risks trap. One more smart word, yes?
Wait. There's also another tool online which handles the topic of ethics about
Sure.
conduct, and it includes, among others, the ICOM Code of Ethics, but also the work UNESCO has done with regards to ethics. So that might help broaden your view on those perspectives.
Generally speaking, my experience in working with very diverse groups of people is, as a person in power in this specific occasion, I am the only one together with the lady in the back, I'm the only one standing, which gives me a position of power. I'm also the one with the microphone, is to spend a lot of time listening and observing, as opposed to having opinions and claiming things of others. Better be on the safe side. Does that help a little bit? You're not completely satisfied. We could fill a week with this question, but that's good. How do we make museums attractive? I'm going to park that one for a second, because that's a very, let's do the low-hanging fruit first, right? Because that's fair. How do you make a museum attractive? Super difficult. How do you cope with conflicting voices? That's also difficult. Spark that one. How do I get into the museum? How do I meet the right people in the museum? So who are museum people again? Don't we have like the boss of all museums in the world? So from your perspective, who would you need in a museum to get intangible, if you're a practitioner, to get it on the agenda?
Well, I wanted to say something about the ownership, because I'm wondering why nobody is questioning the term of ownership. UNESCO, the idea that cultural heritage is universal is at the basis of UNESCO. And as soon as you speak about owning cultural heritage, you speak about who doesn't own it. And then you come to the question, which is currently discussed in the States, only Afro-American curators may curate exhibitions of Afro-American art. This is I think it's very risky. I'm wondering why this question is coming up.
So you're saying maybe instead of asking who owns the cultural heritages, who is it related to, and not use the idea of ownership to avoid the pitfall of getting into a conversation where only people from the 17th century can curate 17th century Dutch art, for instance. Yeah. Some hands? Some hands? Yes, a hand?
Thank you. Just a small comment on that, if I can speak in. Yes, it's also related to the ownership because obviously this is a big issue for all of us. So I work for the Institute of Cultural Heritage of Romania, and one of the big problems that we have in Romania is what the lady just said, cultural appropriation. And I will give you just one example, which I think all of you know, is the jacket, the traditional Romanian jacket that was appropriated by Dior, the house of Dior. So it is, from our perspective, for example, it's one of the cases in which we should talk about maybe not ownership, but I don't know if there is a better word, I'm happy to use it. But for instance, here it's a concrete case of a heritage community that uses a traditional craft that still produces this coat for something like 300 euros, and Dior made it and sells it for 30,000 euros.
All right. So the topic of ownership, or not the topic of ownership, but the topic, the idea of ownership is a very difficult one. Let's move on. I'm happy to go back to it if we have some more time. But now I wanted to ask, how do you get to the right person in a museum? Do you have an idea about that? Who's the best person in a typical museum organization to have ICH in their portfolio, in their job description?
Well, as I said, not the organization, but the museums themselves. So go there and talk to, I don't know, start the director, the educator, the curator. Just start talking and then you will find them.
And don't give up, yes?
In the Finnish National Museum, there's a person who is the community manager. So her task is to work with the communities. And so she would be the right person to approach to and say about your idea and what would you like to do with the museum.
So you've approached people in the museum and they've apparently said no then. What sort of people did you approach?
Well, it depends on whether I met them before or whether I was just looking on the website for information, like who can I speak to. But usually it is like a trainee or a iemand die stage loopt. So I don't know how to get in, like really get in. I'm just knocking on the front door. That's how I feel.
I'm going to give you a mini exercise, right? Rip a page from whatever book you have, but not from the beautiful IMP book, right? Just another book, it doesn't matter. Or if you rip a page from it, then get a new one. Or make it the last page or so. It has the credits on it, which you don't miss. Or a beautiful blank page. I want you to write down on it, because we've all been in this situation, right? Where you needed somebody high up in the tree to tell you that something that you did was important enough to, be part of the organization. Write down in English or Dutch. What other languages do you speak? English or Dutch. Your number one tip. And then at the end, we all hand it over to you. Yes, it's all for you. To use the collective brain. Your number one recommendation to find the right person in the organization, or to talk to the director, to talk to the museum, to get this on the agenda and to get in, okay? Check. So while you're writing down, the question how to safeguard something that is dynamic. I don't know whose question was that again? How to safeguard something that is dynamic. Somewhere here. Your question. Yeah. This is at the heart of both the book, I think, and the toolkit. And I know it depends a bit on what you actually want to safeguard. Is it, is it a tradition, is it a craft, etc. In the inspiration part of the toolbox on the website, you'll find tons of references, both to our own tools, but also to those of others, about how to safeguard, how to deal with specific kinds of intangible cultural heritage and safeguarding them while they're dynamic. And I think that the starting point, and this is for all of you, is we've tried to make a connection between what a museum does in terms of preservation and what needs to be done in terms of safeguarding intangible heritage, and finding connections between those two fields, so that actually it's not something entirely new, but it's using tools that you may know as a museum professional, that you may know as a different type of professional, and applying it to a different field. Okay? I'm just going to be fast. I want to wrap this one up. What to collect? So, whose question was that again? What to collect? What types of ICH to collect? No, if nobody remembers it was this question, I just assume that it's dealt with. All right. There we go. Perspectives on authenticity. That feels like very much like the ownership discussion. So I'm also going to keep it in my pocket for a second and come back to it later. The top question, yours. The archaeology of. Did anyone like understand that question? Does anyone feel like they can answer that question? The archaeology of heritage question, because I didn't even get the question. Sorry. Yes? Oh, you're Ryan. Your Ryan is so smart.
Maybe I can interpret it and
Yeah?
correct me if it's wrong. But actually, together with the partners in the Netherlands and some partners here in the room, we are currently doing a sort of pilot, starting from the question which also came up in the IMP project actually, and how to collect ICH. Can you collect ICH? And if you collect it, what does it mean? And so on. So the whole range of questions coming up there. And we are doing a pilot currently, so the answers are not yet there, but we realize that all museums have registration systems and that it's digital very often, and that it's structuring very much the work being done in collections, and that if we want to cooperate in a good way, that it's also important to think about those instruments that exist. And to see for collection planning and management how ICH can be connected to that or integrated to that in a way that it's also respecting the philosophy of safeguarding ICH and not having only the, for example, the documentation approach or the seeing it as an item, but trying to approach it as a living practice to be transmitted. So actually we are in the full process of scrutinizing this question and hope to come with some answers within 1.5 years. Maybe we can, this could be one of the options for a follow-up project because it's so such a delicate question to reflect upon.
Okay, so it sounds like you're going to recruit for partners for a follow-up project. Is it still working? Did it stop? Yeah, it still works. All right. So again, the intersections that are at the heart of the toolkit and at the book are a good starting point because they also show how museum collecting is different from inventorying, etc., intangible cultural heritage, but also the same. So, for instance, how can we use collection management systems also for intangible cultural heritage? I know there are references to this in the toolkit as well. Now, the toolkit also has a search option. So if you just type in collecting or collections, I'm pretty sure you'll find 1 or 2 or 3 tools that may help you actually to collect intangible cultural heritage more structurally in your organization. Does anyone else have something smart to say about the archaeology of intangible cultural heritage? Hi, Thijs.
Hi. When you said archaeology, I had to think about a project that existed about 10, 15 years ago. It was called graffiti archaeology. So every person doing graffiti, you took a picture and uploaded it to a certain platform on which you could see what was being produced. And graffiti is very dynamic, but in fact, it in turn induced new graffitis being born again on the basis of the platform. So it's a made-to-measure solution, but there are interesting proposition.
Thank you. How do we make traditions, intangible cultural heritage, interesting for young people? Now, I want to see a raise of hands. Who's still young? Yeah? Look at that, look at that, look at that. So, you're young. How do we make intangible cultural heritage interesting for you?
Good question.
I'm going to ask one or two or three other young people. So if you self-identify as young, start thinking about this question.
Well, I don't really think that we should think in it about ages, because if you're old and you care about intangible heritage as well, it should be important for museums to work with you as well. So I don't think in ages if we talk about intangible heritage.
Yet I could argue that to safeguard intangible cultural heritage, transmission to new generations is very important, because otherwise the tradition gets lost. So how do we? Are you part of an ICH community? Which one?
Lace making.
How did you get involved? How did people make you enthusiastic about lace making?
I was in need of a hobby.
You were in need of a hobby. Is there a website for that?
No, it was a coincidence actually. It's a good example for here, because I was at a museum and there was a workshop going on, and I was like, okay, let's participate, and I was able to try it and I liked it, so I enrolled, and now I'm still doing it. So yeah.
So it was actually through a museum that you were interested. Who else self-identified as young? Look at that. We've aged tremendously. I know there were some hands here. Otherwise, I just go on appearances, right? Everybody who looks young, and I see a lot of young people. Who else is young? Yeah, you're brave. You're very brave. So how could we get you involved in tangible cultural heritage?
So I think in between others strategies, it's just like to get a public, to get audience for these kind of intangible traditions. And I think one is very pedagogic from the school. So with introducing these kind of things in the curricula in schools, but just from the very beginning, when the Liki Pignini is in my language, when the very small kids go to the kindergarten. So just, and then when they are young, they already have the interest.
Licky Panini, you're right. What's wonderful. So my son is 6 years old. In school, they now have the wonderful theme before. I told the teacher, there's a lot that came before, right? It's history, but in a stupid Dutch word, vroeger. It's pretty broad. And she said, yeah, but we can do anything from dinosaurs to classical music. Right, great. So it's great. He now is learning that dinosaurs played classical music. I hope that really gets him involved as a Tiki Pinini. One more person who's young. Yes, there's somebody. Are you also involved in an ICH community or group? Yes. So how did you get involved?
So basket making, and I was writing my master's dissertation about intangible heritage instead of about museums, and decided to write about craft and chose a craft basket making, and from that I've been kind of getting into the fringes, and I know a lot of people, and about 10 years down the line I'm going to start making some baskets. But my point I wanted to make was, and I think it's a little bit heretical sometimes, but I think it's really, really, really important to engage children, as in young people, when they're young and enthusiastic. And then I think we have to accept that through the teenage years, there will be a loss of interest. We all, like a lot of museums, put a lot of effort and money into engaging teenagers, which is not necessarily very successful. But I think if you engage people when they're very small, when they come out the other side of being disinterested teenagers, they then remember that they enjoyed all of these things and reconnect. And I think we just need to be a little bit accepting that we can't make everything interesting to all young people, because we all go through a phase where we're not so interested in things. But
we come back to it. The number one predictor of a person's cultural engagement later in life is the level of engagement they had in their early years. So engaging young people, even though we may lose them, helps. So generally speaking, as a community builder, there's 3 things you need to do, and I think they apply to engaging young kids as well. It's inviting people to join, like you were invited to become, or to be on the road to make baskets. Like you were invited to by the museum to start lace making. I really don't know what it is, but that's my English. That wow, is that called lace making? Wow. It's inspiring people. That's also what the museum did, right? It showed you probably what it could lead to, what it could do, and it's to facilitate people to actually participate. Inviting, inspiring, facilitating. You ever want to say something? What do you want to say?
We, as older people, we could start with not looking down on traditions, which we very often do, and by making them boring or telling people that they are boring, they become boring and they become negligible. So I think we should start by telling people that these are interesting and are worth engaging in and participating in. So I think we, as older people, do have a very important role in this.
Let's not make tradition boring. Make tradition fun again.
If you as a person think they are boring, then everyone else will start thinking they're boring. If you think you're not important, everyone else will think you're not important. So we have to change our attitude.
Good. Thank you. There's passion. Absolutely. We're going to do, at the end of the workshop, we're going to do a big, passionate ICH dance, all right? We're going to powerfully convince the world that it's ours. So there are 4 tricky questions left, and each of them requires a little bit of a different approach than what we've been doing right now. So far, what we've done is we've played the toolkit, right? So the toolkit works the way we work right now. It points you to resources and maybe to the people behind the resources that can help you answer these questions. Also, this network, and I think the entire project, can serve as a platform to answer and ask the questions that you want to get answers to. But there are some questions that are maybe more tricky. So how do we make museums attractive is one of them. How do you cope with conflicting voices is one of them. The perspectives on authenticity. And then there's the question, how to proceed from where museums already are. And it inconveniently for that question is on a separate sheet, so probably we're not going to address it one. How do we cope with conflicting voices? We need a conflicting theme. What is something that we all have very different opinions about? Anyone? What is a thing that we feel passionately about, yet have conflicting opinions about? Yes? What is a thing we feel passionately about, yet have conflicting opinions about?
Well, from the general ICH discussions, I know the topics that relate to gender or to the rights of animals always are very controversially discussed, such as hunting. Should hunting be considered an ICH, or should yeah?
Beautiful. So let's just to see if this is conflicting, right? Who thinks hunting is ICH and therefore should be safeguarded? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Who thinks hunting is evil and should be stopped? Can be both also. Nobody thinks hunting is evil. You don't like it. We need a because now we can just kick you out of the room and then the pro hunters win. We need a strong group of anti-hunters. No? Yeah? So who thinks hunting is not ICH and should not be safeguarded then? Maybe make it less explicit. I think it's not as conflicting. In this room, generally there seems to be an agreement that hunting is Yeah. Let's see. We need a conflicting theme. Sorry? Bullfights. So who thinks bullfighting is ICH and should therefore be safeguarded? All right. Who thinks bullfighting should be safeguarded? Who finds that it shouldn't be safeguarded? Good. Conflicting enough for me. Most people don't really care. And maybe we should explain them what. I think that's the same. That's the same with any topic in society, right? There's some on the fringes. There are some people. So imagine I'm the National Spanish Museum, El Museo Nacional de Toreros, in Spain. I don't know if it exists or not. It's definitely not in Catalonia. And I want to work with the community, and there are conflicting views in the community. So there's some people who really feel it should be stopped, even though it is intangible cultural heritage, and there's some people who feel it should go on. Who's ever dealt with a situation like this? Yes? How would you approach this?
First of all, it will be a long process because you will have to work towards a dialogue, and before a dialogue between two opponents is possible, most of the time it takes a lot of efforts to make people talk to each other. Before they can talk really to the problem, they need to know each other on whole basic levels.
So you say before you even start addressing the topic, you need to get to know each other on a basic level. So can I get one exemplar person who's going to be the representative of the entire anti-bullfighting community?
Sigrid also wants to ask something, but isn't the question rather what the role of the museums would be in such a moment?
Well, I think that is, yeah. How to deal with conflicting.
Yeah, or which role to play as a museum.
Which role to play as a museum, all right? Yeah.
And then again, you ignored that a lot of people didn't have a voice. So I think it's important. That's one of the important things, to listen to the voices you don't hear. So you just go one to the and you go to the other opposites, which makes you get opposites. But you need to get more information going, get the voices of the people who aren't heard before, just as one of the acts in trying to change the perspective of opposites.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Because I think it's indeed a very different position. If you are in favor of bullfighting as a tradition, you can say I'm not, but you could also say, but I would rather make an exhibition on it because because of that I want to make to inspire dialogue. I want to see to present the different communities and their voices. So it's a really different outcome. Whether your question is, should it have a place in a museum or should it be a tradition we want to support? It's a very different question.
True. Yeah.
Maybe the other thing in case of museums is like not whether it's ICH or not, but like how do you represent it? I guess that can cause conflicts as well. Like say one tradition, okay, we agree it's ICH and we're doing something in the museum, we want to represent it. But then two groups who practice the same thing kind of start disagreeing on how to do that. Maybe that's part of this question as well.
So I think the question was, and I'm going to tell you a little story. The question was how to deal with conflicting views in conflicting voices within one group of people. So I'd say here, imagine you'd put on this bullfighting exhibition, taking as a museum sort of like 2 or 3 steps back and saying this is something that we notice and that we represent, and then in an evening debate or something like that, we've all had these conflicting voices. They come up and they collapse, and it may be uncomfortable to deal with them. So one of the things that about 10 years ago or so, I was part of a project, and what we did was we brought neo-Nazi youth and youth with a migrant background together in cultural centers, in museums, in theaters, in libraries, with the explicit goal for them to find common ground. So we'd have on one end of the room, literally there, we'd have the neo-Nazi youth, which in Holland at the time were one brand of clothing, Lonsdale, so they were called Lonsdale youth. And on the other hand, we had the migrant youth. And at the start of the evening, each evening, we'd have a wall of security in between the two. Not because we were really, we were really afraid of things that would go wrong, but there would be bouncers, like, well, muscle people, not boys like me. What we did, indeed, is I don't know, you said it, I think, is throughout the night, what we did is we took steps away from the actual conflict, taking 2, 3, 4 steps back from what divided them, looking at until we found something that was shared. And typically we found that actually in a shared cultural practice, which was typically not heritage, more like contemporary practice, more like something they did, like cycling could be in the Netherlands, or a certain food they'd like to eat, or something else. And then from that shared point, from that zone of safety where they were the same, we could carefully explore both points of view. If you look at facilitating technologies for conflict, such as deep democracy, but there are many others, there are basically two things you do. The first one is this taking the step back. So finding common ground so that there's at least some sort of connection that everybody can talk with. And you're right saying that you shouldn't neglect all the people who don't speak up in this process, because the moment you neglect the people that don't speak up, you may create actually a third group that is disconnected. So find some common ground. And then, and I love this one, I think we tried it in this project with cats and dogs, but who's a cat person? Yeah? Who's a dog person? Yeah? So can I get you're a dog person? Right? You raise your hand when I ask, you're a dog person. So what are all the things cat people get wrong about the world?
Sorry, can you?
What are all the things cat people get wrong about the world?
Well, I think cat people. Maybe I don't have a good understanding of cat people, but
You don't even understand keep.
I like dogs, but I also like cats. But
You're not. You're in the middle. Who really likes dogs and think cats are ridiculous? Yeah, yeah.
Cats are very complicated, so maybe I don't like the too complicated.
Cats are really annoyingly complicated animals. This is called throwing the darts, right? It's like we put all the cat people there, all the dog people here, and you just like cats are too complicated. Who's really a cat person who dislikes dogs? Yeah, you hate dogs? Yeah, yeah. So what is wrong with dog people?
Maybe they need too much attention. Or
Oh yeah, they can't live without a continuous affection of their barking four-footed friends, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So cat person, a dog person. You're a dog person? Yes. So what is wrong about the cat people?
I think they like to keep their distance, so it's maybe the opposite.
Cat people are cold people. Yeah? Cat people are cold people. Ooh. I'm just exaggerating here, right? And because I'm a dog person, I'm going to leave it here so that the dog people are one step ahead. This throwing the darts, if you deal with conflicting ideas in a community, after you found some sort of common ground, which in this case we found at the beginning of the day because we're all here, but that may take some more time. It may actually clear the air to express why you think the other person is wrong and explore. It also gives you a very good reason. So now we think, because you've said so, and all dog people believe it, that cat people are cold. But you, as a very warm-hearted cat person, can explain why you're not a cold person. It's a different thing that you like. So just 2 tools, 2 ways to deal with conflicting voices. You wanted to say something?
I wanted to add that, coming back to the question, it's not about who is wrong or who is right. They're just like about multi-perspectivity on the issue and how to represent this multi-perspectivity. So usually it's not like mutually exclusive thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yes.
I just want to add a little bit on the question before, on the position of the museum itself, because you can try to find common ground, but if you work as a museum with tradition bearers around bullfighting, for example, you get an image of the society of sort of museum, but which position do you want to take yourself, and which image you want to spread around? Is it a neutral one? Is it a position in favor of ICH? What do you think about that? Because that's, I think that's the question that is here the most important thing. I think. I want to ask it.
So your question is: as a museum, do you advocate for, regardless of the topic, a position where you say ICH is important, and therefore this is a topic that we may want to investigate, and so is that who feels that position as a museum is valid?
Yeah.
Oh, you have a microphone.
I said, little by little, we arrive to the question why. Because about conflict, what is the position of museum? Is it only safeguarding, so work for the interconnexion, inter-knowledge between diverse communities and so on, and prepare the dialogue, or it is the museum try to resolve the conflicts? So I think we have to go further the simple safeguard of the past, but to build the future. And so the question is how to interest political decision makers to the subjects which are treated in the museum. About communities, for instance, it is very important, because communities not ask only for reconnaissance, but also to get some citizen rights and so on, and equality for citizen rights. So how to make political decision makers inside the museum and make the bridge between communities and political makers by the museum.
I think answering the question, what is the role of the museum in these topics, is a question that's being a continuous debate, and it's definitely not something we try to burn our fingers on in the toolkit. I think there's a very lively debate going on about a new museum definition, and a lot of these issues are at the heart, I think, of that discussion. So the toolkit references the ICOM definition, and I think it also references the discussions around the ICOM definition. But generally speaking, and then we go to you, there are we've identified in the project 4 obvious opportunities. There are many more, 4 obvious opportunities where museums and intangible cultural heritage together can make a difference in the world if you choose to do so. And I have to know them by heart, of course. One of them is sustainable development. A very popular topic, which also policymakers and governments are emphasizing. So if, as a museum, you feel that you should play a role in that regard, the toolkit gives you tools to work on sustainable development. Another is sustainable cultural entrepreneurship, and I'm looking at you right now. There is participation, right? The big push for cultural institutions to be more participatory, actually, until tangible cultural heritage can give this a context and be more meaningful than having a Facebook quiz about which duck you like most or something like that. And the 4th one is innovation. Well, teaser, go to the toolkit and you'll find the 4th one. All right. So we're not here to answer it, but it's there in the toolkit. I know we didn't answer this, but again, it's like a full workshop. So done. How do we make museums attractive? So who hates museums? Yeah? Wow, fantastic. No, that's great. You're excluded from this next exercise, but you'll be somewhere. We'll go to you to answer it. I'd like you. Did you all rip down out a paper and write some recommendations for a friend here? 4. Okay. So rip out another paper, or and you don't have to. You don't have to. I'd like you to turn to your neighbor, and in 1 or 2 minutes, one of the two of you is going to tell you the very first moment, about the very first moment in your life you understood that museums are more than places where you spend a rainy Sunday afternoon, and they actually have a meaning in your life. The very first moment you were touched by a museum. Then after a minute, we turn the other, and the other tells the same story, and then we'll see if there are some trends we can use to make museums more attractive. All right? Go. Okay, the other way around. So now the other person can talk. And stop. That's it. That's it. That's it. Yes. So, if you listened to your neighbor, and the question is, how do we make museums attractive to ICH practitioners? And we assume that the people who do ICH are humans just like us, so that we can learn something from our experience about their experience. Listening to your neighbor, some keywords. How do we make museums attractive for intangible cultural heritage groups, communities, and individuals? Some keywords. Just shout up. I'll repeat them in the microphone for the people at home. Tactile. Touching. Touching. Okay. So touch. Touch. What else? Keywords. How do we make museums attractive to involve
involve them fully
in the museum while they are, like, it can be touch, it can be.
No, no tours, not a watered down experience, but the full involvement. Yes.
Thank you. I'm translating for Fria because she's tired. She says, if you listen, if young people, if you listen to Fatima, if you listen carefully, you can hear that museum people often don't have the openness and the interest in the expertise of the other as worth the same as the expertise of the museum itself. So it takes some kind of openness to see what's outside and how that is even more interesting maybe, or can attach to what your collection or your own expertise is.
So either make museum people more open or hire more open-hearted people. People who are more open. More keywords.
So one way is for the community, and where the community feel reflected on the things that, for example, are in the intangible, in the ICH museum. If they feel them reflected, is the attractive. And for the others, the foreigners, tourists, or so, they have to have the last technology of nowadays. So interactive, and how they say touch, and playing around, creating, not creating the musealia.
So for communities themselves, show that they're represented, and for the tourist, make it sexy.
Well, we're both sharing the idea that our first experience was triggered by recognition. You know a work of art, for example, from a children's book or from a postcard, and then suddenly you have the sensation of seeing it in reality. And that is also linking to what you are saying, that people like to recognize something of themselves in the museum and then see it in a broader context, see it in reality, see it respectfully displayed. I think that's a very important lesson.
So respectful display, but also making it make it recognizable. Yeah, link to people themselves. Yeah, yeah.
Providing opportunities for co-curation and also maybe more importantly co-creation. So you're working together to create something. So I guess that goes into the full representation, full involvement, and that kind of thing. So it's about working together equally.
I'll paraphrase. So Donna Williams is, I don't know if she still is, but she was the director of inclusion at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. She's a fantastic woman. And her motto in her work is you cannot be welcoming if you don't know who you're welcoming. And she interprets that as, if you do a show for a group that is not you and you just do a show for them, you're going to fail. But if you go and understand and listen and take care of people and make sure it's your show, you and them together, maybe also by bringing people on board for a little while, so that you actually really, really well understand who the other is, you can actually be more interesting. So all of this, I think, applies very much. But this is the same issue that museums deal with in almost everything, right? We want to be more open, inclusive, participatory, etc. But we fail to, because the people working in museums, no matter how nice and great and wonderful and lovely they are, they're just a small subset of the population, and thus not representative of all the people that are there. And equally, the collections are just a small slice of the incredible diversity that mankind has created. I noticed this morning that if you type, at least if I type, intangible cultural heritage and museums in Google, Google gives you one of these snippets, right? When they think they know what it is. And they pulled it from my website, and I don't know why they did it, but they said, I wrote, probably because some smarter person than I said it, that this diversity is like biodiversity. The cultural diversity is so much richer than the ducks and the pigeons you see maybe here in the streets, and it's representing this richness that makes a difference. Now, if you're interested in participation, what this has to do with, if you're interested in bringing these communities in, there are tools in the toolkit that help you. There are references in the toolkit to books and other tools that may help you be more open, may help you be more attractive, may help you be more welcoming to others. And I think there's also some references in the book itself, in chapter 2, if I'm not mistaken. It starts already about this topic of representation and participation. So I'd say it's a red thread throughout all of this. I believe we have 4 minutes left, right? Evelyn already came in and she looked angry at me. So yeah, we have a few minutes left, and then there's another video, and then I think there's another coffee break. So I promised dancing. No. Did we answer all the questions, more or less? Yeah, you can say something about languages.
It links in well with the open, inclusive, participatory museum. You can't really have that without languages coming into the equation, I think. And well, what I run a translation agency for museums, and it's always about the main European, Middle Eastern, Asian languages. But it would be wonderful to see more minority languages being considered and represented, and for them to have a voice. And there are many interesting examples of museums that actively involve through co-creation and co-curation that involve people that speak Aboriginal languages or Sami people, I think, the Museum of Legends. So there are very inspiring examples out there of how this is already happening. And of course, language is intangible cultural heritage itself, and it's also the vehicle to transmit that intangible cultural heritage. Is both the carrier and the object of. So it's a very interesting topic. I mean, we could talk about it for hours, but anyway, it's. I think it's interesting also to look at what UNESCO is already doing to safeguard the indigenous languages, because they are. I think, yeah, they're also inscribed on the list of intangible cultural heritage. Anyway, we can have a chat later.
Thank you. Thanks all of you for your contribution, your intelligence, etc. So the toolkit of the IMP project, or the IM project, the Intangible Cultural Heritage and Museums project, what it does is it helps you answer how questions. We've tried to set up a system that is open enough to evolve over time. So the questions that you now ask may actually turn into new tools, and we may link to new materials like the beautiful pizza, where is it? the wheel chart of sustainability that was handed out today. You can find it by going to ichnmuseums.eu/toolkit. But that's easy enough to find. I hope in a little bit, if you type in Google Intangible Cultural Heritage and Museums, it will say there's a fantastic toolkit about that. And then, so to answer the one question that I didn't answer, how to proceed from here, go to that website, type in, use it, apply it, give us feedback, provide your own tools. If you've created something, if it's a case study or not already, send it to Kia, to me, to the team, so that we can put it on there, so that we can collectively help people like Fatima get a fantastic museum show on scale. So not just right here, right now, with a couple of advices on paper, but for all practitioners out there that need that want to work with museums, and also for all those museums that want to find relevance in working with intangible cultural heritage museums. There's a big reward for you if you do one little last task, and that is put all the chairs back where we found them. and you'll be rewarded with the 9th video. I think I'm looking to the back. Yeah, the 9th video, right? Let them put the chairs back first. Otherwise, we're up doing that.